30 men step forward, one after another, and ask Seo Jinwoo to marry them, but she just stares, completely stunned. For 5 years, she's dreamed of hearing a proposal from exactly one person, the Crown Prince, and instead she's got 30 total strangers in front of her, each one dead serious about wanting her as his bride. They introduce themselves as the 30 Sons of Alandos, a race the whole empire fears and looks down on. So how does she end up in this mess? The story rewinds a few months to explain. A storm rages through the mountains as Jinwoo rides in a carriage down a lonely forest road. Her escorts whisper nervously outside, assuming she already knows the truth. The Crown Prince is about to marry someone else. Every word cuts straight through her. She's given him 5 years. She's endured judgment from both the temple and the imperial family, all because she believed they'd end up together. Instead, he's just announced his engagement to another woman, brushing it off as politics, while casually expecting her to stick around as his concubine. Like that should be enough for her. Jinwoo isn't just some regular girl caught up in palace drama, though. She's a Kana, a sacred vessel chosen to carry out God's will, and her whole role revolves around purifying cursed land using her own blood. It's a brutal responsibility she never signed up for, and the only reason she's put up with it is because she believed it was helping build a future with the Crown Prince. Now she realizes she was just another piece in his plans. Before she can even process the heartbreak, the mountainside gives way. A landslide slams into the carriage, sending it tumbling down the cliffside. Horses panic, the frame breaks apart, and Jinwoo gets thrown from the wreckage before blacking out completely. As she loses consciousness, her mind drifts back 5 years, to the day she first woke up in this world. Priests surrounded her bed, and an old man in white calmly informed her she'd been chosen by God and reborn as a Kana. It sounded insane, until he sliced her palm open with a knife. The wound healed instantly, and to him that was all the proof he needed. He asks if she accepts the role laid out for her. She says no. That single word ends up setting her whole cruel fate in motion. This is really where her life as a Kana begins. The priests keep calling her that name over and over, and she just sits there, hands trembling, overwhelmed by all the expectant eyes on her. Someone eventually tells her to just nod if she doesn't understand, and she quietly admits that she does understand the words, she just can't speak yet. Everyone treats her carefully, tending to her every need, but the way they look at her feels distant and cold, like she's been placed on some untouchable pedestal instead of treated like a person. She doesn't belong here, and she knows it. The old priest leads her through a massive door, and she realizes if she wants to survive as a Kana, she'll need to do exactly what's expected of her, no matter what. The previous Akana warns her coldly, hoping the spirit actually landed in the right body this time. The threat is clear. Akana's soul is supposedly immortal, always searching for a new host, which means her current body is disposable. Refuse her duties and they'll kill her. Try to run and there's nowhere to go. So she picks up the knife with shaking hands, slices her palm, and presses her bleeding hand against the heads of everyone lined up in front of her. From that day forward, this becomes her life. Bleeding to purify cursed land, healing the sick, saving people from things she can't even see. Back home, she was free. Here, she lives like property. One evening, she leans against a temple pillar, letting the same familiar sky above her offer a strange kind of comfort. She doesn't even notice she's crying until a voice interrupts her. A young man she's never seen before hands her a handkerchief and tells her to wipe her tears. When a noblewoman greets him as Your Highness, Jinwoo realizes she's talking to someone important, though she still can't fully follow their conversation. The man notices she's struggling with the language and offers to teach her how to speak and write, saying it's the least he can do given everything she's done for the empire. She reaches for his hand, and he takes it. He introduces himself as Prince Aleph Kambout, the crown prince, a war hero, and someone the same age as her. From there, he becomes her tutor, and she picks up the language faster than anyone expects. Their lessons quickly turn into something more, an escape. He sneaks her out into the city in disguise, past guards and expectations, and for a little while he isn't a prince and she isn't a sacred vessel. They're just two ordinary people. During one of these outings, he orders drinks and street food that remind her of the world she left behind. He teases her, tells her that her name can also mean someone lovely, and her heart skips right there on the spot. As the days pass, they grow closer, and her feelings for him quietly start to bloom. Back in the present, she lies motionless on the ground where she's fallen, eyes open, filled with sadness. Everything she once believed in is gone. Jinwoo drags herself back onto her feet despite her battered body, every movement sending fresh pain through her limbs. Stopping isn't an option, not with monsters and freezing weather both closing in. She searches the forest until she finds a small shelter tucked among the rocks, but stepping inside, she realizes she isn't alone. A badly wounded man is already there, barely conscious, a deep gash across his chest. His features mark him instantly as one of the forbidden races living beyond the Empire's borders. And the sight brings back a memory of the Crown Prince once explaining how those races reject the Empire's holy power and choose to rely on themselves instead. He'd dreamed of a world where humans and those races could coexist, and she'd promised to support that dream. Now, here one stands in front of her, and that promise comes rushing back. His wound has already been corrupted by dark energy, and without treatment, he won't last much longer. When she offers to help anyway, he responds with hostility, slashing her hand with a knife and warning her to stay back. She backs off and watches from a distance instead. Left alone with her thoughts, everything she's lost crashes over her again. The betrayal, the memories of happier days, even her own failed attempt to end her life. She can't understand why she keeps fighting to survive when every step just leads to more pain. A pained groan from the stranger snaps her out of it. His condition has gotten worse, and he doesn't have much time left. Noticing the knife nearby, a reckless idea takes hold. An arcana's blood carries powerful holy energy, and in her weakened state, losing enough of it could finally end her own life. Without hesitating, she cuts her palm and forces her bleeding hand to his mouth, letting him drink. Her real goal isn't to save him. She's trying to end her own suffering. Instead, something unexpected happens. The moment he takes in her blood, the dark energy vanishes and his wound heals right before her eyes, leaving him stunned. Meanwhile, the blood loss overwhelms her, and she collapses. Now, fully healed, he can only stare at the unconscious stranger who just sacrificed herself to save a man she doesn't even know. As darkness takes her, one thought lingers. Even after everything, she still couldn't stop trying to live. As Jinwoo loses consciousness, her mind drifts back to the happiest days of her life. Long before everything fell apart, she'd quietly fallen for the crown prince, never asking for anything beyond simply standing next to him. One memory stands out clearest, reuniting with him unexpectedly while carrying out her duties, both of them finally admitting feelings they'd been hiding for too long. From that day on, they openly acknowledged their love, and she started believing that meeting him was the very reason she'd been brought into this world. For the first time since arriving, she stopped wishing to go home. She devoted herself entirely to the future they planned to build together. 5 years later, that dream falls apart. News spreads that the crown prince is engaged to the count's daughter, and refusing to believe it, Jinwoo confronts him directly. He calmly explains the engagement is purely political, that his duties to the empire come first, and that his feelings for her haven't changed. None of it comforts her. Rather than protecting the woman he claims to love, he simply expects her to accept becoming a hidden part of his life. Word spreads through the palace fast, and she becomes a target for ridicule, nobles writing her off as a commoner who never belonged beside a future emperor. She's soon forced to meet the count's daughter, who wastes no time laying out her plan. She'll provide status, influence, and heirs for the royal family, while Jinwoo can simply stay by his side as his arcana. To her, it's the perfect arrangement. Jinwoo is left speechless, and what stings even more is hearing the woman casually use the crown prince's first name, a privilege that once felt entirely personal between the two of them. In that moment, she finally understands the truth. The future she sacrificed everything for was never really hers. She gave up her old life, devoted herself to the empire, and believed love would win out over everything else. Instead, she became just another piece in a political game where her feelings never mattered. The memory fades, pulling her back to the present. Her eyes open and she realizes she never actually hit the ground. The stranger she saved is holding her up. Fully healed now, thanks to her blood, he lowers her gently to the ground, staring at her with quiet disbelief. Unable to understand why someone with every reason to value her own life would throw it away to save a total stranger. The next morning, the female lead wakes to an unfamiliar ceiling, unsure of how much time has passed since she collapsed. A warm fire crackles nearby, and she quickly notices that the deep wound on her arm has been carefully bandaged. Despite everything she has been through, she's still alive, leaving her wondering why her body refuses to give up. Before long, the mysterious man she saved returns. Although he belongs to one of the forbidden races beyond the empire, he keeps a respectful distance and speaks calmly. To her surprise, she can understand him even though his language is completely unfamiliar. He immediately recognizes that she's an outsider and offers her food, hoping to help her recover. Still haunted by everything that has happened, she refuses to accept it and remains on guard. Remembering that he was the first to threaten her with a knife, she makes it clear that she has no reason to trust him. Realizing how frightened she is, the stranger apologizes for his earlier actions and asks if she can speak the imperial language. When she answers, he switches languages without much difficulty, explaining that although this is his first real conversation with a human, he understands that she saved his life by purifying the dark energy inside his body. Wanting to repay that kindness, he offers to treat her injuries properly and escort her somewhere safe. The female lead refuses every offer. After everything she has endured, trusting anyone no longer comes easily. Even when he suggests taking her back toward human territory, she coldly tells him that no one is coming to rescue her. Seeing she has already made up her mind, he doesn't force her to stay. Instead, he quietly gives her warm clothes for the journey and wishes her a safe return before letting her leave. Unfortunately, reality quickly proves far harsher than she expected. Her injuries are far worse than she realizes, and after wandering through the unfamiliar forest, she discovers she's hopelessly lost. Unable to find the Empire's borders and with her strength rapidly fading, she eventually collapses beneath a tree, praying that a rescue team will somehow find her before it's too late. Instead, darkness claims her once again. When she opens her eyes, she's no longer lying on the frozen ground. The stranger has found her and is carrying her through the forest. Panicked, she demands to be put down, but he calmly refuses. He reveals that she has been unconscious for 3 full days and would have died if he had left her alone. Although she desperately worries that being taken deeper into his homeland will make rescue impossible, he promises something she never expected to hear. Once she recovers, he personally vows to return her safely to the human lands. Those words finally break through the walls around her heart. For the first time since everything fell apart, she allows herself to cry, quietly admitting how desperately she wants to go home. The journey leaves her bedridden with a severe fever. Throughout her illness, the stranger never leaves her side, doing everything he can to help her recover. His quiet kindness constantly reminds her of a painful contrast with her own past. As the fever worsens, old memories resurface. She remembers becoming ill back at the temple, where the priests never treated her like a person. Instead, they calmly discussed replacing her with another vessel, leaving her terrified that the people she served would simply abandon her the moment she became too weak. Those memories blur together with the present, causing her to mistake the stranger's attempt to help for another attempt on her life. She panics, but he patiently calms her down and finds a safe way to give her the medicine she needs, until her fever finally begins to break. Over the following days, he continues caring for her without asking for anything in return. He keeps her warm, tends to her injuries, and remains by her side until she fully regains her strength. Once she's finally able to stand again, the stranger reaches out his hand and tells her it's time to leave. Confused, she asks where they're going. He gently explains that they can't survive much longer in the wilderness. If she truly wants to recover completely, they'll need to travel somewhere safe. For the first time since meeting him, the female lead hesitates before accepting his outstretched hand, unaware that this decision is about to change the course of both their lives forever. As they continue through the forest, the female lead insists she can finally walk on her own, but Ransil refuses to let her push herself any further. He explains that her body heals far too quickly, causing serious injuries to recover incorrectly if they aren't treated properly. What should have been a blessing has become a dangerous curse. The explanation catches her completely off guard. She has spent her entire life believing her strange healing ability was nothing more than another gift of the Arcana. Hearing someone describe it as a burden is something she has never considered before. Ransil doesn't stop there. Looking at the scar on her arm, he quietly asks why she was willing to cut herself so deeply in the first place. There is only one conclusion he can reach. She wasn't trying to save him, she was trying to die. The question leaves her speechless. Rather than judging her, Ransil simply points out that no one should treat their own life so carelessly. It becomes painfully obvious to him that no one has ever been there to truly care for her well-being. His words strike deeper than she expects. For the first time, someone is worried about her instead of what she can do for others. As they continue walking, she finally realizes she doesn't even know his name. Introducing himself as Ransil, he once again promises that once she fully recovers, he will personally return her to the human lands. To prove he means every word, he swears by something sacred among his own people. Although she doesn't fully understand the meaning behind the oath, the sincerity in his voice is enough to ease her heart. After years of betrayal and disappointment, trusting someone feels unfamiliar, yet Ransil never once gives her a reason to doubt him. Their journey continues peacefully until the uneven ground suddenly shifts beneath them. Losing her balance, she instinctively grabs onto him to keep from falling. To her surprise, the simple gesture leaves Ransil completely flustered, realizing they've stumbled into a cultural misunderstanding. She quickly apologizes, while Ransil awkwardly tries to explain himself. The uncomfortable moment soon turns into an opportunity for the two to finally introduce themselves properly. Unable to reveal the name from her previous life, she simply asks him to call her Akana. Ransil accepts the name without question, treating it with genuine respect. His kindness slowly begins breaking down the walls she has built around herself ever since leaving the Empire. As they spend more time together, the distance between them continues to fade. Coming from completely different worlds, neither of them fully understands the other's customs. A quiet misunderstanding leads them to share a brief, intimate moment, but instead of bringing happiness, it unexpectedly opens old wounds buried deep inside Akana's heart. Every act of kindness from Ransil reminds her of the Crown Prince. She remembers how desperately she once believed she had found love, only to discover that she had been clinging to an illusion. Compared to the painful memories she carries, Ransil's gentle nature feels almost impossible to understand. The overwhelming contrast finally breaks the emotional dam she has been holding back for years. Unable to stop herself, Akana bursts into tears. Ransil immediately blames himself, convinced he has somehow hurt her. Seeing him panic only makes her cry harder. She tries to explain that none of this is his fault, but the grief she has buried for so long refuses to disappear. Before either of them can say anything more, dark clouds suddenly gather overhead. Within moments, heavy rain begins pouring through the forest. Realizing they won't survive the storm in the open, Ransil quickly leads Akana toward a nearby cave, making sure she doesn't put any weight on her injured ankle. They reach shelter just before the rain becomes a complete downpour. Once inside, Ransil encourages her to rest and regain her strength. For a few moments, only the sound of rain echoes through the cave. Then Akana quietly calls his name. Ransil immediately turns toward her. She hesitates for a moment before asking him to come closer, leaving him completely puzzled about what she wants to say next. Whatever happens after this, it is clear that the distance between these two strangers is slowly beginning to disappear. As the rain continues to pour outside the cave, Akana quietly reaches toward Ransil and places her blood-stained hand on his head. The moment their skin touches, an invisible wave of energy washes over him, instantly clearing the strange haze clouding his mind. Ransel freezes where he stands, his eyes widening as everything suddenly comes rushing back. The overwhelming desire that had controlled him disappears, replaced by crushing guilt as he realizes he misunderstood everything from the very beginning. Unable to face her, he quickly turns toward the cave entrance and quietly says he'll go outside to find food instead. But before he can leave, Akarna reaches out and grabs his wrist, her trembling voice stopping him in his tracks as she begs him not to go. The simple words carry far more weight than they seem. In that moment, painful memories she has spent years trying to bury come flooding back. Once again, she remembers the crown prince assuring her she was the only woman he truly loved while preparing to marry someone else for the sake of politics. He expected her to quietly accept becoming his concubine, as though empty promises could erase years of loyalty and sacrifice. Those memories have haunted her ever since, but for the first time, she refuses to let them control her future. Looking directly into Ranseal's eyes, Akarna quietly asks what if everything between them isn't a mistake after all. The unexpected question leaves him completely speechless. As she slowly admits that staying with him is what she truly wants, Ranseal immediately understands she isn't acting out of temptation or confusion. Standing before him is simply a woman exhausted by years of heartbreak, betrayal, and loneliness who wants nothing more than to leave her painful past behind. Without the slightest hesitation, he lowers himself onto both knees before her and makes a solemn vow that catches her completely off guard. From that moment onward, he declares that his life belongs entirely to her. His unwavering sincerity leaves Akarna conflicted. Part of her wonders if she's only trying to erase the wounds left behind by the crown prince, using Ranseal as an escape from memories she can no longer bear. Yet the more she looks into his eyes, the more she realizes he already understands exactly what she's doing. Even knowing she still carries another man's scars, he chooses to remain by her side without demanding anything in return. Rather than asking her to forget her past overnight, he quietly accepts every part of it, hoping that one day she'll smile because of him instead. As the heavy silence between them begins to fade, Ranseal gently checks the wound on her arm, visibly relieved when she assures him it's healing well. Ever since she nearly sacrificed herself to save his life, he has blamed himself for every injury she suffered, so seeing her recover finally eases the burden weighing on his heart. Little by little, the distance between them disappears. For the first time since fate brought them together in the forest, neither of them hides behind fear, guilt, or hesitation. They allow the walls around their hearts to fall, finding comfort in someone who accepts them without judgment. Before long, their growing trust blossoms into genuine intimacy, not born from reckless passion, but from two wounded souls finally finding warmth after enduring nothing but loneliness. For Akarna, the experience feels completely different from the love she once believed she understood. With the crown prince, every promise eventually became another source of pain. But with Ranseal, she finds patience instead of pressure, sincerity instead of deception, and gentle affection instead of expectations. For the first time in years, she feels valued not because of her power as the Arcana, but simply because she's herself. When everything finally grows quiet again, Ranseal's first concern isn't himself. Looking down at her with unmistakable worry, he gently asks whether she's all right, afraid her weakened body may have suffered because of him. His anxious expression almost makes Akarna laugh. Even after everything they've shared, the only thing occupying his mind is whether she's safe. Resting quietly beside him, an unexpected realization slowly washes over her. Throughout the entire time they spent together, the crown prince never once crossed her mind. For 5 long years, every waking moment had been consumed by betrayal, regret, and the future she believed had been stolen from her. Yet now, for the first time since arriving in this unfamiliar world, that unbearable weight begins to lift. Outside, the storm continues to roar across the forest, but inside the small cave, another storm has finally come to an end. As she closes her eyes beside Ranseal, Akarna realizes she has found something she thought she lost forever. Not love, not yet, but peace. And for someone who had spent 5 years chained to painful memories, that quiet sense of peace is enough to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, she can finally move forward. With the storm finally behind them, life settles into a surprisingly peaceful rhythm. Over the next few days, Akarna continues recovering while growing even closer to Ranseal. Their relationship deepens naturally, but instead of dwelling on the intimate details, she spends her days eating well, resting, and letting her body heal. For the first time since arriving in this world, she isn't haunted by constant fear or painful memories. Little by little, her strength returns, and she realizes she actually feels healthier than she ever did during her years inside the Empire. Living freely in the wilderness has given her something the temple never could: peace. Once she is strong enough to travel, Ranseal tells her it's time to return to his village. Although she insists she can walk by herself, he refuses without hesitation. Carrying her will be faster, safer, and it will leave fewer traces behind for anyone who might be following them. Before setting off, he gently pulls a hood over her head to hide her identity, then effortlessly lifts her into his arms. As they move swiftly through the forest, she can't help remembering the carriage accident. Looking back now, everything becomes painfully clear. Someone intentionally lured her far beyond the Empire's borders, into a remote wilderness where rescue would be almost impossible. Even though Ranseal has protected her without expecting anything in return, She knows there is no guarantee the people waiting at his home will welcome an outsider the same way. Eventually, the endless trees give way to a hidden settlement tucked deep inside the mountains. Before they can even enter, several men rush toward them, stunned to see Ransil alive. Instead of celebrating his return, however, they immediately question how he survived wounds that should have been fatal. Ransil calmly explains that someone saved him, but refuses to reveal any details. The moment their eyes shift toward the hooded woman in his arms, suspicion spreads through the group. Bringing a stranger into their sanctuary clearly isn't something they approve of, especially with the full moon approaching. Trying to avoid an argument, Ransil simply asks whether Kalan is available to examine Akarna's injured leg. The request is quickly dismissed. One of the men explains that the village is already facing a crisis. A companion named Helka is in grave danger, and tonight's full moon has everyone on edge. There is no time to worry about an outsider. Rather than forcing the issue, Ransil quietly apologizes and leads Akarna deeper into the settlement. As she looks around, one detail immediately stands out. Every single person she sees is a man. Not a single woman appears anywhere in the village, making the isolated community feel even more mysterious. Ransil brings her to his own home and offers it to her without a second thought. Although she reminds him she will only be staying temporarily, he still searches through his belongings for clothes she can wear, apologizing that even the smallest set will probably be too large. His quiet kindness catches her off guard. After everything they've experienced together, an awkward silence settles between them. She remembers the promise he made back in the cave, that from the moment she saved him, his life belonged to her. But if he already expects her to leave, did those words really mean anything? Unable to ignore the question any longer, she gently stops him before he can walk away and asks what they truly are to each other. Ransil hesitates before answering honestly. For now, he says, he is simply her temporary guide. The words sting more than she expects. He gently reminds her that she once mentioned people would be searching for her. If she has somewhere to return, then someone must still be waiting for her. Forced to face the truth she has been avoiding, Akarna finally admits that before everything happened, she was supposed to marry someone back in the Empire. Rather than becoming jealous or angry, Ransil simply smiles with quiet sadness and says that if someone already occupies first place in her heart, perhaps he could settle for being second. His answer catches her completely by surprise. In that moment, she realizes those rankings no longer matter. The man she once devoted herself to betrayed her long ago, and there is no reason to keep giving him a place he no longer deserves. Smiling more sincerely than she has in years, she gently cups Ransil's face and asks if he would rather become her first instead. For a brief moment, he simply stares at her, unable to believe what he just heard. Then a genuine smile spreads across his face. Overcome with emotion, he lowers himself before her and quietly thanks her, admitting that even if she eventually returns to her own world, those words alone are enough to make him happy. Unfortunately, the peaceful moment doesn't last. Someone urgently calls Ransil from outside, and two of his companions appear with grim expressions. Before leaving, he apologizes and asks Akarna to remain inside no matter what happens that night. The full moon has arrived, and trouble is already spreading through the village. Hearing that immediately reminds her of everything she learned while serving as the Empire's Arcana. Full moon nights greatly strengthen demonic creatures, but as she quietly senses the atmosphere surrounding the settlement, she realizes something feels far more terrifying than ordinary monsters. Her instincts warn her that another dangerous presence is already lurking nearby. The horrific wounds Ransil suffered when they first met suddenly flash through her mind, making her wonder if whatever caused them has returned once again. Seeing the concern on her face, Ransil gently reassures her that everything will be all right. He promises to return as soon as he can, asks her to get some rest, then quietly steps outside. As the heavy wooden door closes behind him, Akarna is left alone with nothing but the unsettling silence of the full moon and the growing feeling that the peaceful days she enjoyed are already coming to an end. Seo Jinwoo suddenly jolts awake as a suffocating pressure fills the cabin, her Arcana instincts instantly recognizing the horrifying presence surrounding the village. This isn't the aura of an ordinary demonic beast. Someone has reached the final stage of demonic corruption, the point where the contaminated energy inside the body erupts all at once. Once that happens, the victim won't simply die. The explosion will spread across the entire area, contaminating everything in its path and wiping out the village in a single night. She knows only one force can stop something like this, the divine power of an Arcana. But stepping outside means exposing herself. Ransil warned her not to leave traces of her existence behind, and years of serving the Empire taught her exactly why. People never saw the Arcana as a person. They saw a weapon, a miracle they could exploit until nothing remained. The temple claimed to protect her, yet they treated her as little more than a tool. Now she's surrounded by battle-hardened strangers, and she has no way of knowing whether they would value her life any more than the Empire did. Just as she struggles with the decision, a desperate scream echoes through the night. The sound tears straight through her hesitation. She remembers every promise that ended in betrayal, and every time trusting someone left her disappointed. But she also knows she can never ignore someone crying out for help. With a quiet sigh, she pushes open the cabin door and steps into the storm, deciding that one more disappointment won't change a life already filled with them. The violent wind leads her straight to the center of the settlement, where Ransil's companions have surrounded a single man with weapons drawn. Dark energy pours from his body like smoke, twisting the air around him as he writhes in unbearable agony. For a brief moment, she mistakes him for a monster, but the truth quickly becomes clear. This is one of their own. Before anyone can react, the corrupted man suddenly senses presence and charges toward her. Instead of attacking, he collapses into her arms, trembling violently while desperately clinging to her as though instinct alone recognizes she is the only source of relief left in the world. An arrow instantly slams into the ground at her feet, missing by mere inches. Tavon stands nearby with his bow raised, ordering her to step away before the next shot pierces her heart. Refusing to let go of the dying man, she demands to know why they're pointing weapons at their own companion. Looking around at their grim expressions, she finally understands. They've already decided that before dawn arrives, they will kill him themselves. The revelation leaves her stunned. Tavon explains that the man's name is Elka, someone they all respect more than anyone else. It was Elka's own decision. If the corruption reaches its limit, the explosion will destroy everyone he has spent his life protecting. Kalan, the golden-haired warrior, quietly adds that there has never been a cure for someone who has fallen this far. Once corruption completely consumes a person, they become no different from a demonic beast. But Seo Jinwoo refuses to accept that answer. Looking down at Elka as he desperately clutches her clothes despite barely remaining conscious, she can't understand how anyone could abandon someone still fighting so hard to live. Without another thought, she declares that she can save him. Her words are met with complete disbelief. The warriors remind her that even Ransil barely survived his injuries, and reveal the shocking truth that Elka was the one responsible for those wounds while trapped in his corrupted state. If someone capable of inflicting injuries like that has reached the brink of death, then saving him should be impossible. But Seo Jinwoo refuses to back down. She has sacrificed herself countless times to save strangers throughout her life. There is no reason to stop now simply because the risk is greater. Meeting Tavon's eyes without the slightest hesitation, she asks him for a knife. He warns her that if she fails, everyone in the settlement will die alongside Elka. Even so, she calmly replies that if there is even the smallest chance to save someone's life, then the risk is worth taking. A long silence follows before Tavon's resolve finally breaks. Unable to watch his friend die without trying everything possible, he reluctantly places the hunting knife in her hand. Without wasting another second, she slices open her palm and presses the fresh wound against Elka's lips. The moment her blood reaches him, the impossible begins to unfold before everyone's eyes. The violent demonic aura surrounding his body slowly weakens. The dark veins spreading beneath his skin begin to recede, and the unbearable fever consuming him starts to fade. For the first time that night, hope appears across the faces of the warriors. Yet Seo Jinwoo quickly realizes the corruption runs much deeper than she expected. No matter how much blood she gives him, an enormous amount of demonic energy still remains buried inside his body. Fighting through the growing pain, she continues pouring her strength into him, before finally looking up and asking whether the treatment is working. No one answers. The entire village simply stares at the miracle unfolding before them, unable to believe that the impossible is actually happening. The hostility in Kalan's eyes disappears completely, as he slowly kneels beside her and introduces himself properly. He admits that although Elka hasn't been fully cured, she has already accomplished something no one believed possible. Looking down at the blood flowing freely from her injured hand, he asks the one question she never expected to hear. Why would she risk her own life to save complete strangers? Surely someone willing to make a sacrifice like this must expect something in return. The question catches her completely off guard. For 5 long years, no one had ever spoken to her as though saving people deserved compensation. The Empire simply demanded her sacrifices without ever asking what they cost. Hearing the word now feels almost foreign. She looks at Kalan in stunned silence before quietly repeating the only word her mind can process. A reward? Akarna finds the idea of receiving a reward almost unbelievable. For 5 years, the temple treated purifying demonic energy as nothing more than her duty, using her power without ever asking what she wanted in return. Yet, after only a single day with these people, they are already thanking her and offering her a reward. The contrast is almost painful. With a faint smile, she admits that perhaps receiving a reward wouldn't be so bad after all. Kalan looks at the peacefully sleeping Helka and explains that this is the first real rest he has had in days. Grateful beyond words, he asks whether she needs anything before beginning the treatment. Looking around, Akana notices everyone who doubted her earlier is now watching with genuine hope. Seeing their trust, she immediately takes charge, instructing them to prepare an isolated space so the remaining demonic energy cannot spread. Kalan quickly organizes everyone as Helka is carefully moved to the prepared shelter. Before entering, Akana asks who Helka really is. Kalan explains that Helka, whose full name is Elkanese, is one of the tribe's greatest mages. To save everyone, he absorbed the corruption threatening their homeland into his own body. Without the protection of an Elandas, the sacred guardian tree that watches over members of their tribe, the demonic energy slowly consumed him instead. Curious, Akana asks about the Elandas, and Kalan explains that each sacred tree protects a single family line, making its descendants more like siblings than ordinary companions. Helka is considered the eldest brother among them. When she asks why she has not seen a single woman in the settlement, Kalan reveals that female descendants are extremely rare. Realizing her misunderstanding, she quietly laughs at herself. Kalan's expression soon grows serious again. Their own Ellendos is dying, and Helga sacrificed himself trying to save it. Now they are desperately trying to save him instead. Whatever reward he asks for, they promise they will do everything possible to grant it. Akana agrees to help, though deep down she already knows what she truly wants. If everything succeeds, she simply wishes to disappear from the Empire forever and live somewhere no one can ever find her again. Kalan leads her to Helga's quarters and explains that once she enters, a powerful barrier will seal the room for an entire day. No one will be able to enter or leave until the treatment is finished. Before she goes inside, Ransel approaches with obvious concern. Remembering how much blood she lost while saving him, he worries the same thing will happen again. She reassures him with a gentle smile, but when he asks what she needs, she calmly requests a sharp knife. The request immediately shocks Ransel. Before he can protest, Tavon hands her his dagger and warns that if Helga completely loses control, she should strike specific points to stop him long enough to protect herself. Ransel clearly dislikes the idea, but everyone understands that once the barrier is activated, she will be on her own. Taking a deep breath, Akana steps inside. The heavy curtain falls shut behind her, and the atmosphere changes instantly. Instead of finding a dying patient lying in bed, she finds Helga already standing. Before she can react, he suddenly rushes forward and forces her backward. The unexpected attack sends the dagger slipping from her hand before it clatters loudly onto the wooden floor. She tries to call out to him, hoping he can still hear her, but the strange smile on his face tells her everything she needs to know. In that moment, Kalan's warning finally makes perfect sense. Helga is no longer just a patient fighting for his life. He is already beginning to lose himself to corruption. Helga lunges forward, trying to get closer to her again. Akarna presses her hands firmly against his chest and tells him they need to talk first. He doesn't listen. He simply buries his face in her neck and wraps his strong arms tightly around her. She stiffens in his embrace, her mind racing. Then it clicks. He had held onto her last night even when he was completely devoid of rational thought. His body remembered the exact moment his agonizing pain subsided when she was near. To his instinctual mind, she is the cure. While this physical contact might ease his suffering faster, the burden it places on her body is far too heavy. She shoves him away firmly and tells him that's enough. She already promised to make him feel better, so he needs to stop. The moment she gets some distance, she scrambles across the floor and spots the dropped dagger glinting near the bed. She lunges for it, but before her fingers can wrap around the hilt, Helga grabs her from behind and pins her down. She struggles wildly, twisting her body until her fingers finally close around the handle. Then she freezes. Something heavy and firm presses against her back. Her eyes widen in confusion and mounting panic. Before she can process it, her grip on the weapon slips and the razor-sharp edge accidentally slices right across her own palm. She winces in pain, then looks at the cut and sighs. Actually, this is better. She turns her bleeding hand toward him and tells him to drink it. Helga freezes completely, staring at her bleeding palm and doing absolutely nothing. She looks up at his face and her breath catches. Tears are silently spilling over his long eyelashes, dripping down his cheeks. He is crying. She asks him softly what is wrong. Is it because she got hurt? Helga reaches out with trembling hands and gently cradles her bleeding palm as if it were made of fragile glass. Akarna's voice softens as she tells him, "It's okay. An injury like this heals very quickly for her. It is truly nothing he should worry about." Then she winces and lets out a soft sound of pain. Helga looks up thoroughly surprised, and then something completely unexpected happens. He begins to laugh and cry at the exact same time, his shoulders shaking as he holds her palm to his face. Akarna stares at him, completely baffled. Yet a small, genuine smile touches her lips. The pain is real, but the hurt is nothing new to her. Back in the Empire, even when she sliced herself open to save others, not a single person ever asked if it hurt. No one ever cared, but this complete stranger is crying over her wound. The contrast hits her like a wave. Those back in the Empire whom she thought were closest to her were the very ones who drove her into a desolate wasteland and forced agonizing wounds upon her just to drain her power. Was she really the cherished Arcana they claimed to love, or was she simply their captive, valued only for what they could take from her? She looks at her bleeding hand and then at the weeping man before her and makes a quiet decision. She tells him gently that she lied, she doesn't actually want to use the knife anymore. Instead, she suggests they do the treatment a different way. It might take a little longer, but it will be fine. She reaches out and cups his cheek, leaning in slowly. A flurry of self-conscious thoughts floods her mind as she does. But before she can finish the thought, something feels deeply wrong. She calls his name sharply. The pure, sorrowful expression on his face suddenly vanishes. His breathing turns shallow and heavy, and his grip on her shoulders tightens with a desperate, crushing strength. He is acting like a wild beast once again. She tries to push him back, but he doesn't respond to her words at all. She looks up into his face and freezes. His eyes are completely unfocused, dark and clouded by the lingering remnants of the demonic fever. Those are not the eyes of a man who can comprehend language right now. He is entirely driven by a primal, desperate urge to consume her healing presence, to lose himself in the only light that can save his soul. The night takes over completely, and they share an intimate moment as his instincts overwhelm everything else. As the room finally grows quiet, Helga looks down at her with surprising clarity. His voice is calm now, almost as if the terrifying madness from moments ago never happened. He quietly asks her a single question whether he forced himself on her. She quickly tells him no. In her mind, everything that happened was simply part of saving his life, even if the memory still leaves her conflicted. His attention soon shifts to the blood scattered across the floor. When he asks about it, she casually admits it is her own. She deliberately cut herself to heal him. The answer immediately fills him with concern, but she brushes it aside despite her voice sounding painfully hoarse after everything she endured. Noticing her condition, Helka effortlessly uses magic to pull her back toward him before handing her a cup of water. Even after nearly dying, he still possesses unbelievable control over his powers. As she drinks, he studies her quietly before asking for her name. For a brief moment, she hesitates. For 5 years, everyone has known her only as the Arcana. Her real identity has long been buried beneath that title. Still unwilling to reveal everything, she simply tells him to call her Arcana, but Helka immediately refuses. To him, Arcana is not a name. It is merely a title, no different from calling someone human. Then, with a wave of his hand, glowing magic fills the room, forming a massive map suspended in the air. He explains that their world is known as Held Ragnar, while Carnation is only one region created after the Great Vortex split the continent apart. Calling her the Arcana of Carnation is simply describing where she exists, not who she truly is. Then he asks again what her name is. The question stirs memories she has tried to forget. Back at the temple, the priests abandoned her original name almost immediately, insisting that someone chosen by the gods no longer needed a human identity. Eventually, she stopped correcting anyone, allowing Arcana to replace the person she used to be. After years of silence, she finally whispers it aloud, Seojiwoo. Helka carefully repeats it, struggling with the unfamiliar pronunciation before smiling apologetically. When she tells him he can continue calling her Arcana, he refuses once more. The person who saved his life deserves to be addressed by her real name, and he promises to keep practicing until he says it correctly. To him, using anything else would feel disrespectful. His sincerity catches her completely off guard. Then the conversation takes an unexpected turn. Looking directly into her eyes, Helka calmly reveals that she is something known as a dimension crosser, a person who came from another world. The words completely shake her. She immediately grabs his clothes, demanding to know what he means. Wasn't she chosen by the gods? Wasn't she summoned as their messenger? Helka quietly destroys everything she has believed for the past 5 years. According to him, there are no gods guiding her fate. The Arcana is simply a natural phenomenon. When she crossed into this world, her body instinctively evolved to survive there, developing extraordinary abilities as a form of adaptation rather than divine blessing. The revelation leaves her speechless. If that is true, then everything the temple taught her was a lie. They knew the truth all along and simply used faith to control her, turning her into a tool while convincing her she was carrying out the will of the gods. The life she sacrificed everything for suddenly feels built upon nothing but deception. Questions race through her mind, but before she can ask another one, Helka's expression suddenly changes. The calm intelligence in his eyes disappears. His breathing grows uneven as he grabs her hand with frightening urgency, desperately warning her to run before he loses control again. She stares at him in confusion. Only seconds ago, he was perfectly normal, yet now the corruption is rapidly consuming him once more. Before she can react, Helka pulls her close. They become intimate again as the corruption overwhelms his mind, while she desperately tries to calm him and complete the treatment. The room fills with the strange fragrance surrounding his race as another painful battle against the demonic corruption begins. After blacking out from sheer exhaustion, Akarna slowly drifts back to consciousness. Through the heavy haze of sleep, she hears his voice quietly repeating her name in a clumsy, hesitant whisper. Seojiwoo. Helka looks down at her, his dark eyes filled with soft, quiet remorse as he apologizes. Akarna looks up at him with a faint, weary smile. That's still not quite how he says it, she thinks to herself, but at least it isn't that title. Hearing her real name aloud brings a sudden, heavy ache to her chest. For 5 long years, everyone had only ever called her Arcana. She had lived dressed in clothes that didn't suit her, forcing her emotions to remain completely muted and locked away. She was never a person to them, she was just the Arcana. Not a single person in the Empire had ever cared to call her anything else. Even the man she believed truly loved her had only ever called her Arcana. He was the one who claimed to love her, yet her real name had never once crossed his lips. Akarna slowly reaches up and places her palm gently against Helka's cheek. She tells him softly, that's not how he says it. It's Seojiwoo. She is just a human named Seojiwoo. Helka closes his eyes and leans into her touch. He tries again, his voice careful and deliberate as he shapes each syllable. Seojiwoo. He opens his eyes and looks closely at her face, asking softly if she is crying. He gently pulls her close and presses her head against his chest, stroking her hair as he apologizes deeply. As Akarna listens to the steady, comforting beat of his heart, the painful memories of her past begin to bleed into her mind. She remembers a grand victory party held at the Imperial Palace. The Imperial army, led by the Crown Prince, had just returned after defeating the monsters in the west. It was Akarna the Arcana who had cleared the barren, corrupted lands overrun by the beasts, making their triumph possible. The gala was meant to celebrate that perfect victory. She remembers walking through the glittering ballroom toward the Count, her heart fluttering with anticipation. He had promised her dignity. He had promised her the very first dance of the evening. Because the Arcana's body was considered sacred and filled with volatile divine power, she was normally forbidden from attending social gatherings and could only participate in events organized by the temple. But this time she had managed to attend because the Crown Prince granted permission and the Count had promised to bring her. She had been so excited. She wanted to show the entire court that the Crown Prince was her beloved and that they shared a real deep love. But when she approached him and asked for their dance, his expression turned cold and distant. He pulled her into a secluded corner and told her quietly that he couldn't do that. Akarna reminded him of his promise. He dismissed her, saying he had kept his promise by bringing her to the party and telling her she didn't have to react to everything so emotionally. The relationship between the imperial family and the noble houses was complicated, and she simply didn't understand that. The truth was painfully simple, yet she clung to her hope. She reminded him that he called her his lover. He sighed in annoyance and told her it was just a dance, he would be back later. Akarna reached out and grabbed his sleeve, terrified of being left alone in the crowded whispering ballroom, and begged him not to leave her there alone. The Count's face darkened with disgust. He told her not to touch him and shook her hand off with a sharp flick of his wrist before walking away. Akarna stood completely frozen as she watched him cross the glittering ballroom toward the Count's daughter. He bowed elegantly, took the noblewoman's hand and led her to the center of the floor. The entire court watched and smiled as they danced the first dance together, and Akarna stood in the shadows completely invisible, realizing in that moment that she was nothing more than a tool to the man she loved. Akarna squeezes her eyes shut and presses her face deeper into Helka's chest as the memory fades. Here, in this quiet room, wrapped in the arms of a man who is actually trying to learn her real name, the coldness of the Empire feels further away than it ever has before. As Akarna sleeps, painful memories resurface once again. She finds herself back at the imperial banquet where noblewomen quietly mock her for embarrassing herself over the crown prince, while praising him as the perfect match for another noble lady. Watching him smile and dance with someone else reminds her of every promise he broke. In that moment, she finally realizes the Empire never truly saw her as a woman with feelings. To them, she was nothing more than the Arcana, a sacred tool meant to serve their interests. A familiar voice suddenly calls her real name, Xiao Jiwu, pulling her out of the nightmare. She wakes to find Kalan beside her, relieved that she's finally awake. He explains that Helka told him her real name before leaving to meet an old friend, and happily reveals that Helka has made a complete recovery thanks to her. As a token of gratitude, Kalan gives her a specially crafted support shoe to ease the strain on her injured leg, though he still insists she shouldn't be walking until she's fully healed. He also gently reminds her that once she recovers, Ransil intends to fulfill his promise of taking her back to the Empire. Instead of feeling relieved, Akarna's heart sinks. The thought of returning to the place that used and abandoned her fills her with dread. Before she can sort through her emotions, Kalan drags a nervous Ransil into the room after catching him wandering outside for hours, clearly worried about her but too embarrassed to come in. The moment Akarna sees him, all the fear she's been holding back overwhelms her, and tears begin rolling down her cheeks. Panicking, Ransil immediately asks if she truly doesn't want to return home. This time, she answers without hesitation. She doesn't want to go back. Her confession shocks both men. When Kalan asks whether another Arcana would simply replace her, Akarna reveals the truth. She is the only Arcana in the entire world, and according to the Holy Temple, only one can exist in each generation. Hearing that, Kalan realizes the Empire misunderstood her existence from the very beginning, mistaking a natural phenomenon for divine intervention. He also mentions that Helka has gone to bring back an alchemist who may know more about the mystery surrounding her arrival in this world, giving Akarna hope that she may finally learn why she was summoned in the first place. Wanting to lighten the mood, Kalan announces that the village is preparing a banquet to celebrate both Helka's recovery and Akarna's arrival. Although she insists simply being allowed to stay is more than enough reward, Kalan refuses to let the village's savior go unappreciated. Meanwhile, an obviously jealous Ransil awkwardly excuses himself, claiming he has guard duty. Before he can leave, Akarna calls him back and quietly whispers her real name into his ear, telling him that from now on he can simply call her Jiwu. Completely caught off guard, Ransil shyly asks if he is the only one allowed to use that name. When she smiles and says yes, his entire face lights up with happiness. Unable to hide his feelings any longer, he gently kisses her on the cheek before leaving with the biggest smile she's ever seen. The morning after the celebration, Kalan gently carries Akarna to the village banquet despite her insisting she can manage on her own. He refuses, reminding her that her leg still hasn't fully healed. As they arrive, the atmosphere is nothing like the stiff royal banquets she remembers from the Empire. Instead of formal etiquette and hidden schemes, the village is filled with laughter, music, and genuine smiles. One after another, Ransil's companions approach to thank her for saving both Ransil and Helka. For the first time in years, she isn't being praised as the Arcana or treated as a sacred tool. They're simply grateful to Jiwu, and that simple difference warms her heart more than she expects. The lively gathering slowly washes away more of her painful memories. Tavon jokes that he honestly thought Helka would devour her during his corruption, leaving Akarna blushing in embarrassment. Curious, she asks why everyone calls Helka an old man, only to nearly choke when Tavon casually reveals he's well over 500 years old. Kalan laughs and explains that appearances mean very little among their people, and despite all his confidence, Tevon is actually the youngest of them. The cheerful teasing continues as Kalan introduces her to the village's unique abilities, even using magic to instantly ferment fresh grapes into a rich wine. Fascinated, Akarna eagerly tries it, only to discover it's far stronger than she expected. As the evening grows livelier, Kalan suddenly asks her a strange question. Which of the men gathered does she find the most handsome? Embarrassed, she tries to avoid answering, but everyone insists she has to choose. Since Ransil is away guarding the village, she reluctantly points out Tevon, the golden-haired warrior, and another companion with striking purple eyes. She assumes it's all harmless fun, but after a few more cups of magical wine, her surroundings blur together and she eventually falls asleep. When she wakes, she's back in her room with Kalan carrying her inside. Before she can fully gather her senses, the very men she pointed out quietly enter behind him and close the door. Completely confused, Akarna asks what's happening. Kalan calmly explains that since she chose them, they believed they had been selected as part of the reward they wished to offer her. Realizing she has accidentally stumbled into a serious cultural misunderstanding, Akarna hurriedly apologizes, explaining she never intended it that way. Although the companions are visibly disappointed, they accept her explanation with surprising grace. Before leaving, each politely says goodnight, with one shyly kissing her cheek, and Kalan gently kissing the back of her hand, asking her to call for them if she ever changes her mind. Once they leave, the awkward tension gives way to quiet laughter, and even Kalan admits she unintentionally wounded quite a few hearts that night. The mood soon turns more serious. Seeing she has finally begun smiling again, Kalan gently asks about the man she was once supposed to marry. This time, instead of hiding the truth, Akarna opens her heart completely. She tells him about the 5 years she spent loving the crown prince, believing every promise he made only to be abandoned when he chose another woman. She admits she carried that pain alone because there was no one in the empire she could trust enough to tell. Kalan listens without interrupting, offering no judgment and no empty comfort, only quiet understanding. By the time she finishes, Akarna realizes the burden she has carried for years suddenly feels much lighter simply because someone finally listened. After a long silence, Kalan gently squeezes her hand and tells her he finally understands why she refuses to return to the empire. Then, with complete sincerity rather than teasing, he asks a question that leaves her frozen in place. Since the man she loved has already chosen someone else, would she ever consider choosing one of them as her future husband instead? The unexpected proposal catches her completely off guard, leaving her speechless as she realizes this strange village is beginning to offer her something the empire never did, a place where she is valued simply for being herself. Kalan repeats his question with steady, quiet intensity. How about she chooses them as her marriage partners, settles down here and builds a life with them? Akarna blinks, completely caught off guard, and asks if he is kidding. She asks what he even means by all of them. Kalan explains smoothly that in Elrang it is entirely common for women to lead a group. An average group usually has around 30 people. Akarna's jaw drops. She points out that marrying all of them is a decision that shouldn't rest on just one person. Kalan looks genuinely puzzled and explains that male members of Elandos usually don't get chosen at all in their lifetime, because they are not the ones who get to make the choice. Akarna tries to bring some reality back to the conversation, pointing out that she is an outsider. Kalan leans closer and tells her she is not just an ordinary outsider. She is the Arcana who has shown them immense kindness. He adds quietly that she said herself she doesn't want to go back to her world. He isn't going to pass up an opportunity like this. Then his eyes drop slightly as he asks, are they not good enough for her? Akarna immediately feels herself go weak at that expression. She tells him quickly that's not it at all. Kalan plays up the disappointment, sighing that their first impression must not have been good enough, which is why she rejected them earlier. Akarna protests that she only accepted Tevon during the banquet and doesn't even know the names of the others. Kalan's eyes light up instantly. He seizes her hand and asks, so does that mean she would prefer someone she already knows well and has talked to a lot? Akarna realizes too late that she has walked right into his trap. She mumbles that technically yes. Kalan breaks into a triumphant smile and gently places her palm flat against his chest right over his beating heart. He tells her quietly that he wants her to choose him. He reminds her that she knows his name and they have talked a great deal. Most importantly, he is choosing her right now. Before she can respond properly, Kalan's playful demeanor drops entirely, replaced by something fierce and protective. He tells her honestly that he simply doesn't understand how the Arcana of Carnacion was treated so terribly in her own world. He intends to steal her away from all of that completely. He points out that she chose Ransil first and Helka second, so she can choose him as her third. Akarna stares at him completely speechless. Kalan leans in close and suggests that if she is still undecided about marrying all of them, she should simply try it out with him first and then decide. Akarna tries to pump the brakes. She points out that going from a reward to marriage is quite a leap, and marriage is something you do with someone you love. Kalan tilts his head and asks what love actually is. Is it being devoted for 5 years, sacrificing everything and looking at only one person? Akarna winces as the words strike her heart. She had loved the Count and devoted herself to him for 5 long years, and in the end, it only pushed her off a cliff. If that is what love is, Kalan says softly, then he can do it too. He presses further. Did the prince actually love his fiancée more than her? Was what he did really love? Akarna stays completely silent, unable to answer. Having loved everything she had only to be broken by it, she finds no words to argue against a man who has never experienced love in his life. Right now, the very concept of love only fills her with cold, lingering fear. Kalan leans in until his forehead gently rests against hers and tells her quietly now it is her turn to receive love. He presses his lips to hers in a deep, burning kiss. When he pulls back just a fraction, he whispers that if she doesn't like what he is doing, she can simply push him away. But looking into his dark, intense eyes, Akarna thinks to herself he is absolutely not going to let her push him away. She had initially thought Kalan was as beautiful and harmless as a bird singing in spring. But looking at him now, so beautiful yet so incredibly dangerous and calculating, she realizes the truth. He isn't a bird at all. He is far more like a beautiful, hypnotic snake. As the sweet, heavy scent of elven magic fills the room once more, Akarna finds herself melting into his touch and they surrender to the heat of the night. The morning after, Akarna lies quietly watching the steady rise and fall of Kalan's chest. She speaks of the thought that has been weighing on her mind. Does he actually love her? Kalan lets out a long, quiet sigh and tells her gently that for humans, the feeling of lost love and all those painful emotions don't go away easily. Akarna looks away, feeling a tiny, unexpected pang of disappointment. Kalan reaches out and pinches her cheek softly, telling her that no matter what doubts she has, he will gladly endure them all. She should just stay with them and test it for herself until she is finally sure. A full week passes after that night. For some reason, Helka has not yet returned to the village. The days pass in a peaceful blur, the first time in 5 long years that Akarna is actually able to rest completely free from the demands of the temple and the toxic expectations of the imperial court. But as the days bleed together, a lingering sense of guilt creeps in. Is it really okay to just stay here doing absolutely nothing? Unable to sit idle any longer, she approaches Kalan one afternoon and asks if there is anyone sick or injured in the village, anything at all she can do to help. Kalan stares at her in pure disbelief and tells her she doesn't have to do a single thing. Her only job right now is to rest. Ransel quietly agrees. She is their guest. Kalan teases her with a grin, suggesting that if she is really that bored, she should spend her downtime memorizing all of their names. He reminds her warmly that if she is resting comfortably, their minds will be at peace too. Akarna smiles, realizing just how fiercely protective they are of her peace. Then a shadow falls over her. Tavon jogs over and tells her that Helka is back and they should go greet him. Akarna's heart does a nervous flutter as she quickly stands and follows him toward the village entrance. As they approach, she spots a small group walking through the gates. All elves are remarkably tall, but even among them, Helka's imposing figure easily commands the space. But it is the person walking right beside him that catches her attention, a heavily cloaked figure whose features are completely hidden. That must be the alchemist, she thinks, straining to get a better look. She nudges Tavon and whispers into his ear, asking if that is really the person Helka said was incredibly handsome. Tavon smirks and whispers back that the alchemist was probably brought here entirely by force. He doesn't look happy at all. As Akarna leans in to ask another question, Tavon suddenly flinches, his face flushing as he quickly covers his sensitive elven ears with his hands to block out the ticklish warmth of her breath. The small commotion draws Helka's attention. He breaks away from the group and walks straight over to Akarna, his massive frame towering over her, though his expression is remarkably soft. He asks gently how her body is feeling. She tells him she is fine with a small, reassuring smile. Standing a few paces back, the grumpy alchemist watches the exchange, thinking to himself in utter disbelief, who on earth is that incredibly attractive human? Helka apologizes for taking so long to return, explaining that certain people simply refuse to cooperate. Akarna tells him warmly that he doesn't need to apologize. But then a look of grave seriousness settles over Helka's face. He tells her he must ask her for a favor the very moment he returns. Behind her, Akarna hears a quiet, pointed cough. She glances back to see Kalan standing nearby with a knowing arched eyebrow, his recent advice echoing clearly in her mind. Make sure to ask for compensation before doing something for someone else. She turns back to Helka with a small spark of playfulness in her eyes and asks if he also plans to compensate her for this favor. Helka answers without a second thought, of course. He steps closer and gently takes her hand, his large palm engulfing hers completely. He looks down into her eyes with intense, solemn sincerity and makes her a promise. If she can help them with this task, he will personally send her back not to the Empire, but to the place where she truly belongs. He will send her back to the world she lived in before she ever became the Arcana. Jinwoo freezes at the offer, her heart pounding. Years ago, she desperately wanted to return home, but survival eventually swallowed that hope whole, and those feelings quietly buried themselves long ago. She asks Helka what makes him think she still wants to leave, and he explains that historical records show it has happened before, though only around 5 people managed to cross back successfully in 200 years. When she asks about the rest, his answer is blunt. They're all dead. Shaken but pushing past it, she asks what she can do to help right now. Helka gathers the group, Tavon staying behind to guard the village, Ransil and the cloaked alchemist accompanying them instead. The alchemist, clearly irritated by her presence, mutters under his breath in a language she can't follow, though he still obeys Helka without argument. Helka introduces him as Ensi, known in the Empire as the Alchemist of the Outer World, a title that makes her breath catch, since the temple always warned her never to trust alchemists, calling them corrupters of God's word. As they walk, NC explains coldly why the temple fears them. Anyone under an alchemist's protection is likely to actually get sent home. Curious, she pushes further, and NC lays out a devastating truth. Every arcana who's tried to escape and return home ends up hunted down and killed by the Empire, not because the crossing itself is impossible, but because the Imperial forces track them down first. He explains that the Empire has been systematically wiping out other dimensions to secure a monopoly on summoning, and that an arcana is nothing more than a natural phenomenon, an ordinary person who happened to survive the violent collision between two colliding worlds. Most caught in that collision don't survive at all. Those who do, survive purely on force of will. The revelation shatters her completely. She was never a divine vessel. She was just a survivor of a disaster the Empire itself may have caused. NC adds one more brutal detail. Every summoning coincides with a war or mass slaughter, meaning the wars she was told she was sent to stop were actually the mechanism used to summon her in the first place. Helka steps in gently, setting a small sealed container on the table and revealing a tiny, barely living branch inside, the last remaining piece of their dying Elandos tree. He explains that their journey to Carnation was entirely to find a way to save it, hoping an arcana's power could heal what nothing else could. NC admits no arcana has ever managed it before, but thinks she might have a real shot given how long she's already survived. Helka promises that if she succeeds, he'll grant her anything she wants, including sending her home. She agrees to help, telling them she'll decide on payment later. Then she sends Helka away to work in peace, and as he mixes ingredients, Jinwoo notices his hands trembling and his breathing strained. When she asks if he's all right, he snaps at her to stay back, insisting he's dirty. His glove slips off as he recoils, and when she moves to retrieve it, her fingers brush his bare hand, revealing skin corrupted with the same black demonic veins she's seen before. He wasn't calling her dirty. She realizes he thinks he is. He wrenches away, furious, refusing her help and insisting he only wants her to heal the Elandos, not himself. He warns her bitterly that an arcana's power runs on will to live alone, and that it doesn't last forever, throwing out the fates of the others who tried and failed before her. Jinwoo holds her ground, telling him quietly that she still wants to live, and for the first time she truly means it. Looking back on the moment she fell from that cliff, she realizes now it wasn't a wish to die. It was a desperate need to escape and finally breathe. She tells NC firmly that before she heals the Elandos, she's going to treat him first, whether he wants it or not. Determined to help him no matter what, Jiwoo refuses to accept NCRT's attempts to push her away. Even as he insists his condition is beyond saving, she reminds him that he cannot expect to save the Elandos while allowing himself to slowly fall apart. At first, she prepares to use her blood once again, but NCRT's immediately stops her, revealing that such a method would only worsen an alchemist's fragile mental state. His desperate reaction makes Jiwoo realize something she had never considered before. Just like the Arcanas, the alchemists have also spent years carrying unbearable suffering alone. Instead of forcing the issue, she chooses a gentler approach, using the same healing method that once saved Helka. Though surprised by her decision, NCRT's eventually allows the treatment to continue, and little by little, the corruption inside him finally begins to weaken. As the purification progresses, Jiwoo notices the darkness spreading through his body slowly retreating. Even so, she realizes his condition has been left untreated for far too long, meaning recovery won't happen overnight. NCRT struggles to understand why she continues helping him so selflessly, convinced that someone like him isn't worth saving. Jiwoo calmly tells him she isn't helping out of obligation or pity. She simply wants him to live. Looking back on everything that has happened since she escaped the Empire, she quietly realizes something has changed inside her. She no longer wishes to disappear from this world. For the first time in years, she genuinely wants to keep living, and that is exactly why she refuses to abandon someone else who has already given up on himself. Their conversation gradually softens the walls, and Ciartes has spent years building around his heart. Although he stubbornly insists he feels nothing toward her, his actions constantly betray his words, making it obvious that he has already begun relying on her far more than he wants to admit. Before either of them can sort through the complicated emotions between them, footsteps approach the tent from outside, forcing the moment to come to an abrupt end. Stepping outside, Jiwoo finds Ransil and Tavon waiting for her. Since she has been helping Enciartes for so long without taking a break, Ransil brings her food, worried she has forgotten to eat, while Tavon proudly presents her with a bouquet of freshly picked flowers. Their simple gestures make Jiwoo smile. Surrounded by people who openly care about her well-being, she begins to realize just how different this village is from the empire she left behind. The conversation soon turns playful as Tavon teases her about Enciartes and asks what she thinks of him. Embarrassed, Jiwoo avoids giving a clear answer, making both men laugh. Tavon also notices that Ransil speaks to her far more naturally than everyone else. Ransil simply smiles, reminding them that he was the first person she met in this unfamiliar world. Encouraged by Jiwoo, Tavon promises to stop being so formal around her, and the atmosphere grows even lighter. As evening clouds gather overhead, Ransil gently reminds Jiwoo not to overwork herself, and warns that heavy rain is on the way before he and Tavon return to their duties. Carrying the food they brought, Jiwoo heads back into the tent to share it with Enciartes. Instead of thanking her, however, she finds the normally composed alchemist sitting quietly with an unmistakable pout on his face. Watching him look over something he refuses to explain, Jiwoo can't help smiling to herself, realizing that beneath all of his cold words and stubborn pride, Enciertes is far easier to read than he would ever admit. Jiwoo notices Ency stubbornly refusing to eat after Rensil and Tavon stop by with food. It doesn't take long for her to realize he's quietly sulking over something she said earlier. When Tavon had asked whether she thought Ency was handsome, she admitted she wasn't sure, never expecting him to overhear the conversation. Smiling helplessly, she explains that she has barely seen his face because he always hides behind his silver hair and eye patch. It has nothing to do with his appearance. Although Ency pretends to dismiss the explanation, his embarrassed reaction gives him away, making Jiwoo realize that beneath his cold personality is someone surprisingly awkward. With the misunderstanding finally settled, they continue his treatment together, and as the corruption slowly fades, the distance between them quietly disappears. Without either of them noticing, the trust between them grows even deeper, and they spend another quiet, intimate moment together as the healing continues. By nightfall, heavy rain begins falling across the forest, filling the shelter with a peaceful silence. Jiwoo watches Ency rest after enduring so much pain, relieved to see the frightening black corruption retreating from his body. His breathing is calm now, and for the first time since they met, he looks like someone who can finally sleep without constantly fighting for his life. As she quietly looks at him, she notices he has removed the eye patch he always wears. Seeing his face clearly catches her completely off guard. She had imagined someone frail hiding beneath it, but instead finds a calm, striking face carrying the quiet dignity of someone who has survived countless hardships alone. Looking at him now, she realizes he never hid because he was ashamed of his appearance. He hid because the burden he carried was far heavier than anyone could see. Before long, exhaustion overtakes her as well, and she drifts to sleep beside the steady rhythm of the rain. Morning arrives with the same gentle rainfall tapping against the roof. When Jiwoo wakes, she discovers Ency isn't resting anymore. Instead, he has fallen asleep at his work table, surrounded by scattered notes, alchemy tools, and carefully prepared materials. Even after finally recovering, he spends the entire night searching for a way to save the dying Elandos instead of thinking about himself. Nearby, she notices the flowers Tavon gave, her carefully arranged in a vase beside the tiny branch of the sacred tree. The sight reminds her just how much the Elandos means to everyone in the village. To them, it isn't simply a tree. It is their guardian, their family, and the very foundation of their lives. Wanting to help in any way she can, Jiwoo gently places her hand over the fragile branch and channels a small amount of her arcana power into it. Almost immediately, a warm golden light begins glowing from within the branch itself. The tiny response fills her with hope. For the first time, she truly believes the Elandos can still be saved. Excited to tell Ency, she turns toward him only to stop herself. Seeing how exhausted he is after working through the night, she quietly decides to let him sleep a little longer. As she lies back down, Jiwoo can't stop thinking about how much has changed since arriving in this strange land. Not long ago, she wanted nothing except to disappear from the world that betrayed her. Now she finds herself worrying about people she only recently met, hoping they can protect the home they treasure so dearly. The warmth she once believed had vanished from her life slowly begins returning, little by little, through the kindness these people continue showing her. The heavy emptiness left behind by the Empire no longer feels impossible to bear. Her thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a faint sound beneath the rain. At first, she mistakes it for the storm outside, but the quiet noise continues, carrying a sorrow that makes her heart tighten. Following it through the dim shelter, she finally finds Ency alone, believing no one is watching. The proud alchemist who always hides behind a cold expression has completely broken down. Years of loneliness, exhaustion, and silent suffering finally overwhelm him as he quietly cries to himself. Jiwoo remains frozen where she stands, understanding that this has nothing to do with physical pain. For so long, he has carried the burden of protecting everyone else while convincing himself that no one could ever save him in return. Looking at his pale hair gently illuminated by the morning light, she is suddenly reminded of the fading Elandos. Both have continued sacrificing themselves until almost nothing remains. In that quiet moment, Jiwoo makes another promise to herself. Saving the sacred tree is no longer enough. Somehow, she is determined to save Ency as well, no matter how stubbornly he insists he doesn't deserve it. The tiny branch of the sacred Elandos finally begins showing signs of life, and the entire village erupts in celebration. For the people of Held Ragnar, the Elandos is far more than a sacred tree. It is the source of their lives, the guardian that raised generations of their people and protected their homeland for centuries. Watching everyone celebrate fills Jiwoo with mixed emotions. Although she is the one who made the miracle possible, old habits keep her standing quietly at the edge of the crowd instead of joining the celebration. After spending years inside the Empire as nothing more than a tool, she simply doesn't know how to accept gratitude anymore. Tavon quickly notices her standing alone and walks over to her. As they talk, Jiwoo admits she still isn't used to people thanking her for what she does. Tavon can only laugh at how naturally humble she is, reminding her that everyone here genuinely wants to repay her kindness. Before long, Helka rushes over as well, overwhelmed with gratitude after seeing the Elandos respond to her power. Soon, Ransil, Kalan, Ency, and the rest of the village gather around, each thanking her in their own way. Their joy is completely genuine, leaving Jiwoo almost overwhelmed by the warmth surrounding her. For the first time since arriving in this world, she no longer feels like an unwanted outsider. Even NC, despite pretending to be annoyed as usual, admits she deserves every bit of the praise she is receiving, leaving Jiwoo smiling despite herself. As preparations begin for another banquet, Helga explains that their journey to Held Ragnar will soon begin now that there is finally hope for the Ellendos. Kalan also reminds Jiwoo that the village still intends to reward her properly for everything she has done, no matter how much she insists she needs nothing in return. Before the celebration begins, Taevon quietly asks her to take a walk with him outside the village. Away from the excitement, he brings her to a peaceful hill overlooking the surrounding forest, giving her a chance to breathe after everything that has happened. Looking over the beautiful scenery, Jiwoo realizes just how much her life has changed. The fear, loneliness, and despair that once consumed her have slowly been replaced by people who genuinely care whether she smiles or not. Seeing her finally relax, Taevon speaks honestly about his growing feelings for her. He even asks whether she could ever imagine becoming part of their family one day. The unexpected question catches Jiwoo completely off guard. She still hasn't sorted through the emotions left behind by the Empire, making it impossible for her to give him an answer. Sensing her hesitation, Taevon doesn't pressure her any further. Instead, he jokes about making sure she chooses him next time, lightening the mood before they prepare to return to the village. Their peaceful moment ends almost instantly when armed soldiers suddenly appear from the forest. Jiwoo immediately recognizes the unmistakable armor of the Empire, and every painful memory she tried to leave behind comes rushing back. The soldiers waste no time identifying her as the missing Arcana before attempting to capture her on the spot. Taevon reacts immediately, shielding Jiwoo and effortlessly driving back the first attack. Even while mocking the soldiers, it is obvious he has no intention of letting anyone lay a hand on her. As more Imperial troops surround the area, the situation quickly spirals toward open battle. Just as both sides prepare to clash, a single command suddenly stops every soldier in their tracks. The ranks part, allowing a familiar, noble figure to step forward. The moment Jiwoo sees him, her entire body freezes. Standing before her is the Crown Prince himself. Staring at the woman everyone believed was dead, he can barely hide his disbelief as he quietly calls her name. After everything Jiwoo has gone through to escape the Empire, the past she thought she had finally left behind has found her once again. The Crown Prince steps forward, completely ignoring Taevon as his eyes remain fixed on Jiwoo. Relief fills his face as he tells her he searched everywhere after believing she died, pleading for her to return to the Empire with him. But instead of feeling relieved, Jiwoo only feels her heart grow colder. She can't understand why he suddenly wants her back after everything that happened. If he truly thought she was dead, why bring soldiers all the way to the outer world searching for her? Was he really looking for her? Or simply searching for the Empire's Arcana? Without hesitation, she tells him she has no intention of returning. Her answer only makes him more desperate. Believing she wants a greater position, he suddenly offers to make her the future crown princess if she comes back. The Imperial soldiers are stunned by the promise, but Jiwoo can only laugh bitterly. Not long ago, those words would have meant everything to her. Back then, she would have gladly accepted without hesitation. Now, they carry no meaning at all. She quietly reminds him that she never wanted a crown or a throne. She only wanted to be loved sincerely, yet he abandoned her the moment politics became more important than her feelings. Even now, instead of understanding her pain, he immediately talks about finding other women to bear royal children as though that solves everything. At that moment, Jiwoo finally realizes he has never truly understood her. Taevon has heard enough. Stepping in front of her, he openly mocks the Crown Prince for believing he still has anything worth offering. He reminds everyone that Jiwoo doesn't even belong to the Empire, making the prince's grand promises completely meaningless. The soldiers immediately reach for their weapons, but before the situation can escalate further, Taevon calmly lifts Jiwoo into his arms. The Crown Prince desperately orders his men to pursue them, unwilling to lose her again, but Taevon disappears into the forest with effortless speed, leaving the soldiers far behind. Once they are safely away, Jiwoo can no longer hide her emotions. The encounter tears open wounds she thought were beginning to heal. She questions whether the prince's version of love has ever been love at all. If returning means living the same lonely life inside the palace and temple, sacrificing herself while watching him build a family with someone else, then nothing would ever change. Taevon quietly listens without interrupting before gently reminding her that she no longer has to carry those painful memories alone. The one left disappointed today isn't her, it's the Empire. His calm reassurance slowly eases the weight crushing her heart, and after giving her enough time to recover, he brings her safely back toward the village before the Imperial search party can discover their home. When Jiwoo wakes later, she finds herself resting inside a quiet room with Kalan, Ransil, and Taevon waiting nearby. Their worried expressions immediately soften after seeing her awake. Kalan explains that he intentionally gathered only the people she trusts most because he doesn't want to overwhelm her after everything she has been through. Their concern reminds her once again how different this place is from the Empire. No one orders her to stand up and continue working. No one treats her like a sacred tool. Instead, they simply worry about whether she is all right. Even so, her thoughts remain troubled. Ever since arriving here, everyone has needed something from her. The Empire wanted Arcana to maintain its power, while the people of Held Ragnar hope she can save the dying Ellendos and protect their future. Looking down quietly, Jiwoo finally voices the burden she has carried for years. In a tired voice, she admits that she doesn't want to be the Arcana anymore. Those simple words leave the room completely silent, marking the first time she openly admits she no longer wants to spend her life existing only for everyone else's expectations. If you want to see the complete story, comment Arcana below. Until next time, ciao.